RJ, we are back, and we're going to talk about week 4 and 5 of the Diddy trial. To me, this is where we get deep into the weeds, right? There's clearly some abuse happening. We've seen him physically batter a woman on camera. Cassie, I have a daughter. I have a wife. There's many women in my life. My instinct is to go, I hate this guy. My instinct is to go, I want to see this guy come down. I want to see him go down hard. So that's where I think it gets more complicated, and we have to take a step back to do like real jurisprudence, to do like legal analysis. This is where I want to pick your brain and go, yeah, all of that looks terrible, but let's dive into the weeds. What is this witness saying? What did she say on cross-examination? Do we poke holes in these witnesses' testimonies? And really asking the tougher legal questions of like, is he guilty of these specific crimes? So it's all of this was sparked by a little lawsuit.
Yeah, one lawsuit.
Speaking of lawsuits, we have our first sponsor.
Yes, sir. YMPK Law. They're aggressive attorneys that will maximize your recovery. Mm-hmm. I actually know the members of YMPK, so I'm really happy and proud to make that sponsorship and that endorsement.
What areas of practice do they have?
Car accidents and personal injury, but they have a broad practice, but those are the main areas.
So you can call YMPK for a lot of legal needs, but particularly for car accidents, personal injury, that kind of stuff, reach out to them.
And if you mention our show, if you call them and say, we heard you on American Crime Podcast, YMPK will actually call you back within 1 hour. They'll give you special service if you mention our show because they want to make you happy.
Here's a disclaimer, everyone, that I'm going to flash on screen right now for a few seconds. Right, RJ? A little legal disclaimer. What does it say?
Basically says use your own good judgment.
Okay, let's get back into it. Whew, it's tough to talk about these women and the allegations they're making. They all are victims in one way or another. They all are traumatized in one way or another. And here we are, week 4 and week 5. We're seeing the defense, Diddy's defense, cross-examine these quote-unquote victims and try to poke holes in their stories, right? You're probably more used to this than most people because you're a criminal defense attorney. You're a veteran, 2 decades or more in the business. You've tried so many cases. You're used to looking under the surface level of a bad person and trying to dive into the legal bullet points, right?
Yeah. Well, what you got to do is you got to parse that in your closing statement. You've got to tell them to the jury, is Sean Combs a bad guy? Absolutely. Is he a dirtbag? Yes. Is he the worst person that you've ever seen? Absolutely. But we're not here to judge his character. We're not here to decide whether or not he cheated on his girlfriends. We're here to decide, did he have a RICO enterprise? Has that been met beyond a reasonable doubt? That alone, number one. The second one is sex trafficking. Have they proven sex trafficking beyond a reasonable doubt? The sex trafficking comes down to one word and one word only: consent. If there was consent, there's no sex trafficking. Mm-hmm. There could be transportation, which is different. I mean, calling an escort in and of itself is transportation. Mm-hmm. Having an escort come and have sex with you from another state or another jurisdiction is, so the transportation, I think, is toast.
Okay.
The real key is the RICO, and the other real charge is the sex trafficking. If you believe Cassie, she was trafficked. He beat her. Remember, the elements are force, fraud, or coercion. He coerced her. He threatened her. He said, if you don't do this, I'm basically going to take away your money. He beat her sometimes. That could fall under sex trafficking if the jury believed that Cassie had no choice. And I believe her name is Dawn Hughes.
There's a number of witnesses in week 4 or 5. We'll go over them. Yeah. I have a list of them. And what I want to do is talk about what they claim, and let's talk about how did the cross-examination maybe hurt them. Nobody wants to sit here and say these women are liars and they're making all this up. However, we got to be brutal about the way we analyze this from a legal standpoint. And so let's talk about who they are. Who do you want to talk about first? I kind of have a list of, we got Cassie Ventura, we got Mia, we got Brianna Bongolan, we've got Eddie. He's the one male that's relevant. He's the hotel security guy.
Yeah, he actually became a police officer, didn't he?
And then we have Jane, another pseudonym. So
yeah, Jane was on the stand until today. So she was on the hot seat for 5 days. And Jane is a great witness for both sides because you have to identify, is Jane a groupie Or is she somebody that was abused by Sean Combs physically? Was she forced to sex traffic herself? I think the defense did a great job in the cross-examination, because there were a lot of things that Jane said that sounded like she was more of a heartbroken girlfriend rather than somebody that was trafficked.
Do we have a rundown of some of her claims?
Yeah, she said that she was forced to have three-way sex with some guys that she didn't want to do. But then again, she gave them a male erection pills, which is contrary to what somebody would do if they didn't want to have sex with them. She texted Sean Combs several times, I'm very horny. I want to do a hotel night, which is the debauchery night, the freak-offs.
A lot of her claims and sort of the ugly-looking stuff she talked about mirrored what Cassie Ventura talked about too, where Jane, the witness, calls them hotel nights.
Right.
That was, we would assume that was the name given to him at the time by Diddy. Mia would call them freak-offs, but they seem to mirror each other, right? There's a lot of lubricant. There's a lot of like heavy sex activity happening, and a lot of third parties, like a lot of other men having sex with these women while Diddy watches, and a lot of drugs.
And the drugs go to the coercion, because you're not in your mindset. You can't consent when you're under the influence of alcohol and drugs. That actually negates your intent to formulate your opinion under the law. So they're using that to say, even if they technically consented, and which is what Jane said, look, everything that I said, these positive texts that you're referring to about him, I was under the influence of drugs. I was doing it to appease him. I was doing it because I knew if I didn't do it, he wouldn't pay for my rent. He wouldn't pay for my lifestyle. But that cuts both ways. The jury might say, you know what, this is just sour grapes. You're just upset because you found out that Sean Combs was with Young Miami at the time. That's when you decided to flip on him. That's when you got upset because you were jealous. But she's saying, no, I'm not jealous. I knew he was a polyamorous person. But at the end of the day, it's going to be what the jury believes. Is the jury going to believe that at some point she was consenting, just like Cassie, by the way? And I want the audience, the American Crime Podcast audience, to know you could take away consent. In other words, if you hypothetically had consent for 29 days out of the month, the 30th time you could say no. And that's pretty much what Cassie and Jane were saying. They were saying at some point it did start out consensually, but then they didn't want to do it anymore. And Sean Combs had his hooks on them at that point.
Right. To dive a little deeper into that.
That complicates it.
It's so complicated.
Yeah.
And I want to get into the complicated aspect of this we're trying to ascertain what's happening in the mental state of this person, Jane.
Yeah.
We're trying to understand, is Jane coming back to Diddy repeatedly, time and time again, because she's a victim who's under his grip, who's under his financial control, who has no real choice or ability to consent? She is locked up. I mean, it's like a kidnapping victim. Like, she's tied up and locked up, not with rope, not with physical barriers, but with a financial obligation of sorts that he has masterminded and spun around her. So he's got her trapped. Is that the case? Or does Jane really love being with Diddy? Is she into him? Is she jealous when he's with other girls? Is she upset when he showers other girls with gifts? Because, like, from some of the cross-examination, it seems like a juror might reasonably conclude that her motivation to be there was emotional. She was into this guy. She was happy to be with him and partake in these sexual acts. And to underscore that emotional bond that she had with him, she got upset when he looked at other women, when he was with other women, when he gave gifts to other women. And so if she did, is she really a victim that's locked into a scenario, or is she a woman who's emotionally attached and upset when he gives attention to others?
That's going to have to be described by Dawn Hughes, the expert psychologist who also testified in the R. Kelly case. She's going to have to put this together for the jury and explain why Jane went back to Sean Combs, why Cassie Ventura went back to Sean Combs.
On behalf of the defense?
On behalf of the prosecution.
Okay. She wasn't in the Johnny Depp trial, was she? The name.
I'm sorry, I said Johnny Depp, and not the Johnny Depp, not the R. Kelly trial.
She was in the Johnny Depp trial.
Yes.
That woman was fantastic.
So
I thought she came off like a very reliable expert.
Well, from a defense point of view, I
In
got
Johnny Depp, it was for the defense.
I got you. Yes.
Is she for the defense here?
No, she's for the prosecution.
It'll be so interesting to see her take the other side.
Yeah, and she testified in this case that it's basically about power and control over the abuser of the victim. Wow. And she testified that a victim's financial independence on an abuser plays an important role in an accuser staying in that abusive situation. So it's like a hold, a mental hold. You talked about a rope around the person. It's a mental rope around the person based on financial
rope,
emotional,
right,
psychological, all intertwined. And you need an expert to explain that. But at the end of the day, is the jury going to say, "Oh, come on, you could have walked away"? We know other people have bigger problems. It's not like he literally held a gun to your head. But that's why Dawn Hughes needs to really explain that this is a psychological phenomenon. Abuse does happen on a mental stage, not just a physical stage. And that's why these complaining witnesses or victims keep coming back to Sean Combs.
She did admit that she was mad when other girls got expensive gifts.
Right.
Is it a problem, or will Dawn explain that away?
Dawn's got to explain it away. She's got to explain, I think what she'll do, and I've done these trials before regarding rape cases and why a victim stays with the rapist, and it goes to trauma bonding. She talked about trauma bonding. There's such a thing as trauma bonding, where you feel, even though the person is victimizing you, you know the person, you like the person, you think about the characters that you fell in love with, and since you've gone through that with them, you want to stay with them. I know it's reverse psychology, but Dawn Hughes is going to explain why you still want to be with them, not to shake the ecosystem of your family, of your livelihood, and so forth.
It's like patterns where somebody who's been abused in a relationship seeks out further relationships that abuse them, or like somebody who's been with an abusive guy ends up seeking out abusive guys as well.
And there's a cycle of abuse she testified to. So it's a different, what cycle was Cassie in, what cycle was Jane in? And the ultimate thing is there a crime committed? We're not talking about domestic violence. The defense needs to focus on, okay, he was a bad guy. What the hell does this have to do with sex trafficking? What the hell does this have to do with RICO? They need to pound this away, that this is a bad guy. He committed domestic violence. We get it.
Right.
But at the end of the day, the government is making something out of nothing.
Right. And it seems like the defense...
Overreaching.
But yeah, and so the defense is... sort of scratching away at those elements of those crimes by trying to show that these women are emotionally entangled with Diddy, not victimized financially, not having a rope around their neck, but rather through their own conscience and through their own decision-making are falling in love with him, are infatuated with him, like to be around him, would miss him if they weren't there, right? I mean, this is what the defense is trying to show. Is that all? I mean, is that generally the gist of Jane? There was more about Jane, like she was jealous when he showered other girls. She researched the word cuck, C-U-C-K.
Yes.
And was that a Google search she did or something?
Most people do Google searches.
We don't know. Yeah. I haven't read deeply enough on the case to know where they found out, where the investigators learned, or was this information turned over in discovery? How do we know? I'm just curious.
I don't know about that part.
Okay.
I don't know
but apparently she researched the word cuck because she was trying to understand what it meant, which makes the freak off sound something like, okay, so it means like she was feeling like she was being cuckolded. So she was feeling like he was giving attention to other people, and she was sort of a cuck.
And that's the argument for the defense, that she was just fine with knowing that Sean Combs was having other relationships with other females, and she wasn't fine up until that podcast episode with Young Miami, where she basically bragged about the sex that they were having, which caused Jane to be very upset. So is Jane really a victim of sexual abuse, kidnapping? Because remember, kidnapping is, you could trick somebody. She claimed that, she invited her to Turks and Caicos under false pretenses. That's kidnapping. You can't invite somebody over under false pretenses. It could be kidnapping. Right. It could be sex trafficking. You got me here and I can't leave now. I'm stuck here with these entertainers.
It's against her will.
It's against her will.
Right.
But the thing is, all these little things, the text messages, I enjoyed it. I had a good time. That's got to be explained away by Dawn Hughes. Why is she saying these things, these nice things about Sean Combs when she claims she's a sex puppet, right?
Right, and the jealousy is an interesting element here. Is it that when a woman feels jealous of Diddy giving attention to other girls, does that mean that could that be consistent with her being a victim and being a trauma bonded person who's locked in here against their will? Could you be there against your will with him and still be jealous if he's got other people there?
Again, that's going to be explained by the psychologist. The answer is probably going to be yes, that victims of sexual abuse, they tolerate a lot. They have a low self-worth of themselves, low self-esteem. They will do things, and the argument from the prosecution is going to be Sean Combs knew this, took advantage based on knowing this, and it was against their will, which goes to the RICO predicates. A predicate act of RICO is that you're committing any kind of harboring or transporting sex for the purposes of your enterprise, which is what they're saying. They're basically saying that Bad Boy, that Sean Combs is the king of Bad Boy, and he did what he wanted through Bad Boy Productions, using his personal assistants to commit crimes like putting drugs on the planes, having hookers and escorts come, having three-way sex. All this is illegal, and he did it under
three-way
the umbrella.
sex is not illegal.
If you call escorts to another place against the will of somebody, it is illegal. The transportation alone is illegal, so he's toast right there.
Got it.
So all of this, they're saying he kept doing it over and over again, and he used the Bad Boy as a cudgel to do what he wanted.
Right.
And that's RICO. RICO means you're using your In-N-Out Burger or whatever it is, your McDonald's, as the front, but in reality, you're beating people up, you're extorting them, you're kidnapping them, and you're doing things under that front. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. And it all, in this case, the predicate act, the predicate crime, the individual crimes we're looking for to then bootstrap to the racketeering organization.
Right.
In this case, with witness Jane, those predicate acts, these alleged crimes, are the sexual transportation and prostitution aspect of this. And yet, but so the defense is trying to say, no, you weren't transported against your will.
Right.
You weren't trafficked. You loved this guy. You went back time and again.
Right.
And you were jealous when he was with others.
Yeah.
So that's
Jane, to me, Jane doesn't make the case or break the case. I think Jane is a wash. I think they're just, for that count, I don't think if Jane's going to withhold, I don't think it has been met beyond a reasonable doubt. Let me put it that way. There's some doubts with Jane.
Okay.
So Jane, I think, is going to be either a hung jury or not guilty on Jane.
Okay.
Cassie Ventura is a problem.
So Cassie, she started the dominoes falling with her lawsuit.
Yeah. So he loses RICO on just Cassie, sex trafficking on Cassie, transportation on Cassie.
He loses?
Well, yeah, because Cassie said that she forced her to have sex with male workers, and he transported her to different locations in different jurisdictions, Miami, Los Angeles, New York. So that's sex trafficking, and if they believe just Cassie is,
if they believe Cassie, you're right,
and I think they will.
And Jane
had inconsistencies. Cassie didn't.
Okay, so you think Cassie is a stronger witness for the prosecution?
Much.
Okay.
They always put on their strongest witness first,
because then people glaze over.
That's right. That's right. So by the time you get to Jane, you're already snoozing.
Let's talk about Cassie. We've talked in depth about what her claims are. Anybody can go to our previous episodes to recap that. But now we get to see her cross-examined, right? And that's fascinating. And we don't want to call her a liar. We want to believe these victims in these cases if we want to find justice. However,
complaining witnesses. By you saying victims, you're assuming Sean Combs is guilty.
See, that's interesting. Even by me saying victim,
well,
right? That's a bias.
There's a connotation that something happened.
You're right. I'm kind of coming at it as a father, as a husband, not as a legal mind.
They're a complaining witness until they're proven to be victims.
So Cassie Ventura, the complaining witness in this case, we know what she's complaining about. We know about the freak-offs. We know about her allegation that it was all against her will. It was all against her will. She had no control. She had no choice in the matter.
She testified to that, yeah.
You can't say you're being held against your will if you're voluntarily there or if you're in love with the guy and want to be there. So the defense says, but you were sending him loving birthday messages, weren't you? And you said, I love you in all these recordings and in these messages. It doesn't add up with you claiming that you didn't want to be there.
That's the part that Don Hughes is going to explain when you're a supposed victim, that you tolerate, you endure, and because of the coercion and the fraud and the fear, you stay with that person. And remember what Cassie said, Sean Combs started shaking her down for money. He had demanded $20,000 when she didn't want to be with him. She didn't have the money. She had to get her mom to get a HELOC loan to pay him back. He could easily press a button and stop everybody's finances, and just that's the stranglehold that he has on these complaining witnesses. So the jury has to parse that out and say to themselves, has it been proven beyond a reasonable doubt that he was using Bad Boy to do this to these people so that he could get his way, so they could have these girls have the freak-offs?
So Don Hughes is going to try and explain that from Cassie's point of view.
If they don't have Don Hughes explain that, they're not going to win the case.
Right.
They got to make a connection because everybody's scratching their head and saying, okay, wait a second. You're having sex with 3 guys. You're buying them erectile dysfunction pills.
Is that true of Cassie?
No.
That was Jane.
But Cassie did arrange to pay a couple of times from her pocket, but 90% of it was done by Kareem Karan, the personal assistant to Sean, which I think she'll be up next. Her and Don Hughes to close it up. The personal assistant will explain what she did for him, to explain the predicates for RICO. And then Don Hughes will probably tie it up. So the jury will go back there and say, hey, listen, that's what Don Hughes is saying. She's saying this is all normal, that victims, they go back to the person because they got a mental hold on them. They got the stranglehold and they can't do anything about it. So they're going to go up to the jury instructions and say, was there coercion? Check. Was there fraud? Check. Was there sex? Yes. Was there a jurisdiction that the person went from A to B? Yes. And therefore, boom, guilty.
And to argue against the coercion element, the defense is going to say she wasn't coerced.
That's right.
She
Consent.
wanted to be there.
Right.
She paid some of these third-party guys to have sex with her.
That's Jane.
Even Cassie handled some of the administrative parts.
Yeah, but how are they going to get her on the video when it's dragging her? She said that she was in a freak-off and she did not want to be there, and that's concrete proof that she did not want to be there. That one incident alone could be RICO right there. And sex trafficking. And transportation.
If I'm steel manning his case, an unenviable position to be in, but if I'm doing that, then I'm going to say, well, you're just taking her word for why that happened. Yes, I abused her. I agree that I abused her. I beat her on camera. I'm not trying to get out of that. But it wasn't for the reason she claimed. It was for different reasons.
And what's the reason?
She took my phone. She was trying to search for other exes that I had, and she was getting jealous. And I don't want her taking my phone. Give me my phone back. Well, so I lost my temper, and I just turned into a brutalizing, like a caveman mentality. And he's going to say, I'm ashamed I did that. I'm sorry I did that. It's just not RICO.
But he's not testifying.
I know. I'm just saying his defense is going to stay that on his back.
They're just going to make an argument. But human psychology is, well, why isn't he testifying? And I only heard her, and I kind of believed her. I wish he testified so I could balance the equation.
So you're saying that video, that terribly abusive video that we all see and we recoil from, that video goes to her truth for saying she's a victim and she's there against her will.
That video is not only what's going to cause his demise, but that's what started this case. If it wasn't for that video, we wouldn't even be talking about this case right now. Mm-hmm. That case manifested itself from that video. Mm-hmm. And that video explains every single thing through the corroboration of witnesses like Cassie, including Jane, who said, oh my God, what Cassie went through when I saw that, I went through it a month after seeing the video. Mm-hmm. So that video, to me, is everything. It's hard evidence that he has the ability, the propensity to commit those acts. It shows a different side to him that nobody's ever seen before. And if Don Hughes could explain that away, why the complaining witnesses kept coming back, Sean Combs is in trouble.
Wow. No, I get that. That's the complex part of this. It's like, can she explain that away and make Cassie's testimony feel authentic to the jury? And you're right. I mean, he's got...
The RICO, to me, it bothers me, the RICO, because RICO is typically used for a mafia.
It involves a team of people conspiring.
Organized crime.
An organization. Yeah. So far, every allegation is just Diddy alone. So, it comes back to the Dave Chappelle punchline. They got this guy in a RICO case by himself.
Yeah, I have a problem with that. I think they're utilizing weapons. I mean, there are the weapons. There's an arsenal of weapons in the law books that you could use, but it doesn't mean you should use it. There's something called the letter of the law, and then there's something called the spirit of the law. This is not within the spirit of the law to go just, shake somebody down for RICO because they had, some parties and there was some sex involved. And then you try to make something out of nothing is what I call it. But that's what they're doing, in my opinion. And it doesn't mean that he won't go down. If the government wants to get you, they're going to get you.
Can I say that most rock and roll and rap artists, if you wanted to build this kind of a loose RICO case against them, you probably could.
Of course you can.
Because you could say, hey, they organized the procurement of some kind of mind-altering device through the aid of some roadie or a guitar tech.
Entourage.
Or part of their entourage.
Right.
So this is now racketeering and
You do long enough, yeah.
influencing corruption in an organization similar to John Gotti and the Italian Mafia.
Well, if you and I, all right, we started American Crime Podcast, all right, but if we start having some parties now and invite some girls over and we give them some X and we fly in some other people.
Tell me more.
And we just keep doing that over and over and over again. And our American Crime Podcast is kind of not really what it's about anymore. It's really about the parties now. Mm-hmm. And our American Crime Podcast is just a side benefit.
It's a front.
Not a front, a side benefit. I don't think Bad Boy was a front. I think it was a side. I think it was a benefit. He used it for power, wielding power, and saying, "You want to be with Bad Boy? You got to do what I got to do."
But it was the source of his power. The source of his power comes from selling records and selling out shows.
Through Bad Boy.
Yeah,
That's
that's the source of the power, not racketeering and corruption. And then,
well, they're saying that he turned it around. That it was originally, you know, just like Suge Knight with Death Row. It started great, you know, with the rap artists and everything, but then he started using that umbrella illegally, and he kept doing it over and over again.
Okay.
By the way, there's a pattern of behavior. Sorry to cut you off. So that's a part of the counts. They got to show a pattern of behavior for it to be RICO. Mm-hmm. So if they show a consistent pattern that he had the means, that he had a purpose, the purpose was basically to have these freak-offs, and that he was using Bad Boy as that cudgel or that umbrella, he might go down, even though I disagree with the law, the way it's being used.
Look, I'm trying to play devil's advocate here.
Yeah.
I want to steal man Diddy's side. Okay. I'm trying to argue his side. I think it's the tougher side to argue. Again, I'm taking off my hat as a father of a daughter, as a husband. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to be brutally, legally blind and analytical about this. Analytical. So, if you take an artist, one of my favorite artists of all time, Tom Petty, okay, and we all know, God rest his soul, like R.I.P. I'm so sorry to like drum up his name in a negative context. I'm such a fan of his, but in order to steal man Diddy, if you took Tom Petty and you looked at the fact that he did use friends, roadies, guitar techs, or other associates to try to procure painkillers when he was on the road because he didn't have access to them any other way, that was technically an illegal thing to do. Are we going to now say that Tom Petty ran a RICO organization? Let me give another example. Prince. Huge fan of Prince. What an amazing artist. God rest his soul. I'm trying to bring up names of people that are long gone, that are not going to get hurt by us naming them. Prince had a history of procuring some kind of painkillers or other mind-altering or nerve-altering chemicals, drugs. He didn't do it by himself all the time, like actually get on the phone with someone on the road and get it and meet somebody in the parking lot of a Jack in the Box and get some kind of painkillers in a bag. He used other people to do that. A friend, somebody on the crew, could be the roadie, could be the tour manager. This happens in the music business. They're trying to get the artist the drugs they need. In this case, painkillers. Are we going to accuse Prince of running a RICO organization of racketeering and corruption to commit these predicate crimes, procuring drugs?
It's got to be two or more predicates. That's
two or more.
Two or more.
If he did it on
drug trafficking is not enough.
If he did it on 2 occasions?
Nope. It's got to be
two or more different predicate crimes.
So kidnapping, gambling, arson, bribery, extortion, drug trafficking, wire fraud, and mail fraud.
Interesting. So the drug trafficking would be easy for most artists.
Now, drug trafficking is a federal crime to do that. You could still get busted for transportation. But if you're talking about RICO, then you need two or more predicate. So in that Tom Petty example.
Wire fraud. If you're on the phone.
Absolutely.
And you use the phone to do this.
But most people don't use their phone to order drugs. But yes, if the government wants to, I mean, they could needle their way and figure it out.
But you're making a good point. It's not as loose as I'm making it seem.
No.
With Prince, with Tom Petty, this doesn't jump up. With Diddy, it seems like there's a lot more going.
Look at it this way. The predicate acts are a dartboard. And what you just told me, Tom Petty had like barely one dart that hit the board.
It's off the board to the side.
Diddy's got 5 darts.
Right. And
6 darts.
And they're kind of bullseye, right?
And they're hitting the bullseye every time. So the government can't ignore it.
Right.
You know? So,
it's a good way to put it. Yeah. For people out there to understand like the complexity, but also the severity of his case versus some of these other hypotheticals.
R. Kelly had a few darts. That's why he went down. Weinstein had a few darts. That's why he went down. He didn't go down for RICO. He went down for other things.
What were the few darts Weinstein had? Because a lot of it was related to one.
Well, when I say darts, he had a lot of darts. He had 12 or 13 women that allegedly testified that they did all this.
But it was the same wrong act, right?
Right.
So it's sort of a single thing, isn't
so
it?
he was in RICO. That's a bad example, but I think R. Kelly was RICO, wasn't he? I
don't know.
I know for a fact Suge was. Let me check on.
It's relatively new, this RICO thing they're throwing at people.
Yeah,
right?
they're using it pretty aggressively. Like I said, this is usually used for mafia, for organized crime typically, but now they're using this weapon that's called RICO for anybody basically. Oh yeah. Kelly was convicted of RICO. R. Kelly was. So they're starting to use RICO everywhere. I mean, you could use it against, if you think about it, you could use it against a politician and saying that you're holding your office, you're using the umbrella of the office to threaten people. To kidnapping could be, by the way, kidnapping is very simple. You want to see how you could get kidnapped? A senator says, you ain't leaving this room. You're going to stay right here until I tell you so. That's kidnapping.
Can be.
So are we going to use that now combined with something else to go after the politician for RICO? It's a slippery slope, but I see what you're saying.
Yeah. But clearly he's got a lot more to worry about than Tom Petty would have or Prince would have in a similar situation. He's got so many more predicate crimes.
Yes, a lot.
Who else do we need to talk about? I mean, there's Mia, the pseudonym Mia. She also, I think it's sort of the same pattern. She's claiming to be victimized, to be there against her will in all of these situations. And the defense is cross-examining, saying, hey, you didn't claim you were mistreated at the time. You didn't leave and you had multiple chances to get away. You kept coming back. You never reported anything at the time. It's only since he's been sued that you've come out of the woodworks. And if you were really traumatized, Mia, why did you stay around for years? So it's sort of the same pattern of claim and defense playing out with Mia as Cassie and as with Jane.
Yeah, Mia is also just another corroborating witness. Her testimony, in my opinion, is to show a pattern of behavior, or what we call a modus operandi, a method, opportunity, plan, and intent of Sean Combs and what he wanted to do. And she corroborates some of the things that other people said also regarding his manipulation, his coercion.
Right.
And who better than the personal assistant, right?
Right. So if it was just Cassie, excuse me. If it was just Cassie, that'd be one thing, but now you have corroborating witnesses, Mia, Jane, a couple others. What if so it does seem to lend truth, right? The commonsensical takeaway is, hey, there's multiple women saying the same pattern occurred. They're probably telling the truth.
And physical abuse. Mia testified to physical abuse. Spaghetti being thrown at her, apparently punched her, sexually assaulted her.
Again, mirroring the MO in the other girls.
And also the financial thing, dangling the financial carrot, which means if you don't do this, I'm not going to pay you. Apparently, she was owed $80,000 in annual overtime wages.
So he was kind of keeping her on the hook with accounts payable.
And when she asked her for it, he ripped it up. He ripped up HR's notice just to show Mia, what are you going to do about it?
Again, not a good guy at all. Really, in any sense of the word.
That's an understatement of the year.
It's just does.
Sean Combs not a good guy.
But do we get him on? That should be a T-shirt. But do we? Everybody can agree on that, even the prosecution and the defense.
Maybe even Sean, because he made a statement on Instagram. I hated myself then. I hate myself now.
Yeah, everybody can agree. It was part of Tenny Giragos's his defense attorney's opening statement.
Yeah,
this is not a good guy. We understand how multiple women lends credibility to the claim, but let's make the harder argument now. Let's go to the other side of the defense. Can they have alternate motivations to be saying these things?
Of course.
Tell me what those might be for Mia, for Jane, and for Cassie.
Oh, very simple. Two things. Number one, retribution for being abused for many, many years. They're not happy about that. And the second thing, compensation. They want to be compensated financially. Because if Cassie got $10, $15 million, why can't I get $5 million? That's the mentality of these individuals.
So it could be in a reasonable juror's mind, could be, that Mia sitting there on the stand testifying and saying all this stuff and kind of saying a counterintuitive claim that I know it looked like I wanted to be there, but I really didn't. I know it looks in these videos like I really want to be there, Cassie, but I didn't. You're saying, and I'm saying, the alternative theory is, hey, you're doing this for the money. You're saying that for the money. Mia, you're testifying because you stand to make a lot of money here. Is that true of Mia? Is that true of Jane, that they stand to make some money?
Yeah. In fact, Brian Steele, who was one of Sean Combs' attorneys, asked me, because Mia made an allegation that she was raped, and he said, is that what you would say towards a man who allegedly raped you? That you would demonstrate public love and affection in the media? And her response was, I was still brainwashed. So again, Don Hughes needs to explain this, because as a juror, I'm thinking, wow, how are all these people so brainwashed?
Everybody's brainwashed.
What is Sean Combs? Is he like a Jedi mind? Does he have the Jedi mind trick?
Right.
You will listen to me.
Right.
You will do whatever I say.
Right.
But in a sense, that's what's happening. So Don Hughes needs to explain that.
Don Hughes will probably explain that to the best of her abilities. She's a powerhouse. She's a beast. I mean, I saw her in the Depp trial, and she was just so comprehensive and detailed and well-spoken and likable.
But here's my counter to Don Hughes. As a defense attorney, I would say, you didn't interview anybody. You didn't interview Mia. You didn't interview Cassie. You didn't interview Jane. You're just giving us blanket testimony based on theoreticals and theories. She's going to say yes.
Right.
So that's how you attack her right there. And you're giving blind testimony. Isn't that true? Yeah. In other words, you don't know what's going on. You're just theorizing everything. Right. If you met with Mia and she didn't tell you the truth, would that change your opinion about your testimony? Well, yeah, it would. If Cassie, you interview Cassie and she wasn't consistent with you, or she said something that you didn't find credible, would that change your testimony? Yes, it would. But you didn't do that, did you? No, I didn't.
That's a really
I would tell the jury, she wasted your time.
That's an amazing future cross-examination of Don Hughes, which I guess we'll see. We'll see on the part of Giragos and the defense team.
Right.
What happens next? We got Don Hughes to look forward to, and then what?
Kareem Karan.
One of the assistants again?
Or Coram. She's one of the assistants. She's mentioned all over. She's peppered all over this case. You heard her do this, heard her do that. So I would be shocked if they don't call her. And there may be another witness coming, another expert.
Do you still think there's a chance that Diddy gets on the stand himself? No chance.
No chance.
Okay.
I will play this podcast again. There's no chance.
No chance.
I'll tell you why. You can't control a megalomaniac, an egomaniac, and he is an egomaniac. And at some point, you can't control that. And you don't want to put a loose cannon on the stand. It's better to argue, look, he has a right not to testify. They didn't prove their case. This is a money grab for the sex trafficking, a money grab for everything else. The RICO wasn't proved, and then you argue reasonable doubt. But here's the problem: I don't think they're going to win on the transportation. How are they? That's like a slam dunk. I never usually say that, but the escorts were brought from point A to point B. They testified to it. You can't do that. He flew them on the jet, so I don't see how it gets out of that. But I think winning in this case is actually deflecting 2 out of the 3 bullets. If you could deflect the RICO, deflect the sex trafficking, and you lose on the transportation, it's not so bad. I know.
Yeah.
I know Sean Combs is probably thinking, I don't want to go to prison, but better to go to prison for 8 years instead of life.
Would he get time served too? He's already...
He's getting 85% credit. I'm sorry, he's getting 85% credit, yes.
Meaning of the time served already?
Yeah, so if he has 10 years to serve, he would only serve 8.5 years out of 10 years.
No, but what about the years he's been in prison?
Oh, he's getting credit for that.
Waiting for
plus 15%.
It's been over a year now.
So it's going to be a year and 15%. He gets an extra 15% for good time, work time credit. That's how the Metropolitan Detention Center does it at the federal jails.
Cool. Anything else to touch on here?
We're going to probably get a verdict. I'd say pretty quick in the next 2 weeks, we're going to get a verdict.
Okay, when we get a verdict, let's come back and talk. Again, can we say a thank you to our first sponsor ever?
Yeah.
YMPK Law Firm.
YMPK, they're aggressive attorneys that bring excellent results. They've been around for many years. I know them personally. Give them a call, talk to them, tell them that American Crime Podcast sent you. They will not only take better care of you, they will immediately respond to you and talk about all your needs.
So if you do reach out to them and you have a legal matter you want YMPK to solve for you, they're good at doing that.
Car accidents, personal injury, slip and fall, anything, they will take care of you, and no recovery, no fee, and they get high rewards. So I'd highly recommend that you contact YMPK Law.
And let them know American Crime Podcast sent you. That's good for us. It's good for you. We want them to know that. What is their official tagline?
Aggressive attorneys that will maximize your recovery.
Aggressive attorneys maximizing recovery. That's pretty important if you're going to hire a lawyer, right?
Yeah, and
You want them to be aggressive.
Yeah, and they're there to help you navigate through all your legal issues from the beginning to the end. You don't have to worry when you hire them. They'll take care of everything for you.
Some lawyers are more aggressive than others, would you say?
Sure.
I mean, you've encountered a lot of lawyers in your time.
I have, and I know these guys. I know them personally, and I could say that I would recommend that you go to them. I would have my family go to them.
Got it. Now, again, we're going to put up a little disclaimer here because we're talking about a legal firm, and apparently there's laws that we can't really advocate for a lawyer. So we have to put up this disclaimer. Here we go, everybody. Look at this disclaimer. Read it. Pause it if you have to. We cannot really be telling you what law firm to choose. They're our first sponsor. We appreciate the heck out of these guys. And so we're going to do our best to get them a lot of business.
Thank you, YMPK Law.
Thank you, YMPK Law. All right, let's come back and talk more.